What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about how British and American restaurants are different. As an American, I've never been to a British restaurant, but I guess I just kind of assumed it was the same sort of thing that we do here in America. You go inside, you pay for your food, you eat it, and then you go home, that kind of thing. But apparently not, because today we're going to watch 7 ways that British and American restaurants are very different, according to this video. So I'm actually quite interested to see what kind of differences in our restaurants. So let's take a look.
So here are 7 ways in which British and American restaurants are very different.
Okay.
For Brits,
Service. The service is different. Oh, this is cool. This is stuff I never even thought. I thought we were going to talk about like the food or something like that. Or this is like the restaurant experience. The service is different. Okay.
moving to or even visiting the United States of America, one of the biggest culture shocks, at least for me, was the kind of round-the-clock attention that servers pay to their customers. What's that? Your glass of water is empty? We can't be having that.
What? Wait, what? What? This is not standard? In Britain, you're not treated like the king, the emperor of your little table for that time period? That's what you're paying for. But no, I don't know what to think about this. This is not something I thought would be different. I guess I never thought of this in the way that he's thinking of it, from his British point of view. That's funny, when you go to an American restaurant, they treat you like royalty or something. They're attentive to you. Yes, I would agree that that's just normal here in America. I think it's mostly based off that the server wants a good tip. So yeah, they like if they want a really good tip or even an extra special tip, they go out of their way to make sure your drinks are refilled. Usually drinks are free refills in America, and that I don't know, they ask how your meal's going. They ask if you want to order anything. It can almost get annoying at times how often some waiters come up to you, but it's nice, and I didn't know that was different.
American servers come right on over, minus the whistling sound, usually. And in between that and a bite of your broccoli, American wait staff will be over just to simply ask, how's that food tasting?
Yes,
Can I get you anything else?
Yes. That's he nailed it. How's the food tasting? That's the classic American server question. I didn't know till now that was an American thing. They'll just come over, be friendly, be like, how's it tasting, everybody? Anything else I can get you? They'll bring the water, they'll refill your drinks without you asking. And I have to admit, I have always considered that to just be kind of standard protocol. So if I went to a British restaurant, would I just be a snob? I'd be like, oh, they haven't even come over and refilled my water more than twice. This is terrible. They haven't asked me how my French fries are. This is horrible. Americans might be caught off guard by this.
Golly gee, that's a nice accent. Which part of Australia are you from? Those kind of questions. Whereas
Right.
British wait staff are staff that, wait to come over until you're all done. And part of this is tied to the notion of tips and tipping. In Britain,
Really?
contrary to popular belief, servers do make a bulk of their income from tips. But unlike in America, tipping is voluntary and not at all expected. A lot of Brits who come
Oh. He said in Britain, waiters and servers in Britain do depend on tips, but tipping is not expected. Here in America, tipping is absolutely expected. Basically, like, I almost want to say required. You're going to be considered really a jerk. Like, if you don't leave any tip at all, even if it's a small one, that would be very strange. You only do that if the server has offended your mother or something. It's just been horrible.
come to the United States, myself included, don't know this at first. In my case, I even asked the waiter how much I should tip, so I gave her the 75% she recommended and moved on. Of course, with time, I came to learn that the expected amount here in the United States of America is 15 to 20% of your...
Yeah, 15 to 20% of your bill. And So that explains it. In the United States, waiters assume you're going to tip, and you are if you're a normal American. So they know they have an incentive to work for that tip, to wait on you really attentively and earn, the bulk of their income. But in Britain, there's not that same motivation because it's not even a guarantee that there's going to be a tip. I think that's it right there. Wow.
Bill and or check will come onto terminology later. It's often been noted as
Portions. Okay, that was fascinating. This is really interesting. That's a huge difference I never thought about. But this difference I have thought about. Portions. I've heard this before. Apparently, I love it. Apparently, American portions are just out of control, and I'm here for it. I'm here to enjoy it. It's normal to me. I have adapted to it. I go to a restaurant, and I can almost expect to bring home the excess for lunch the next day. It's lovely. One of my favorite things about America, I'm discovering, is our giant portion sizes. Although you do got to be careful with the whole health aspect of it, of course.
especially within the fast food industry, that portion sizes in the United States of America are much larger than their European counterparts.
Right.
But often, depending on where you go, this can also be true of sit-down restaurants.
Now this just makes me think, like, if I ever went to Britain, would I just starve to death? Or would I just spend all my money trying to, like, having to buy 2 orders of everything? Because I wouldn't be used to the small portion sizes. Maybe I'd just lose a bunch of weight. The British diet is just eating normally, like a normal British person. For an American, that'd be a diet. Wow.
One of the first major American sit-down chain restaurants that I visited was a little place called Applebee's. And at the likes of Applebee's, but also the Olive Garden or TGI Friday or any number of other chains, your appetizer almost feels like a main course / entree. Again, terminologies later. And by the time that the actual main course arrives, you eat it merely out of politeness. While
It's so funny. It's so entertaining hearing this from his British perspective. Because it's like, yeah, when I stop and think about it, like, I can observe these differences. The waiters are very attentive. Thought that was just normal because they want a tip. The appetizers are huge. I just thought that's normal. Like, you kind of get used to it, I guess. Wow.
pretending that this is all fine, and then, this is the really funny bit, they ask you if you want to see the dessert menu.
Yes.
And of course you can't say no, because you're addicted to cheesecake. And that's always humongous and rich, as opposed to humongous and poor, which is what you are when you leave the restaurant. Except that cheap joke doesn't quite work, because American food, on the whole, is actually cheaper compared to the food served in Britain, which is partially how you account for the portion size difference. Now, after a
American food is cheaper. And we get more of it that way? I don't know how that works out. I'm scared it's because our food is like lower quality or something, or it has stuff in it, which I'm pretty sure it does compared to other countries around the world. But we get more of it. We're probably gonna die sooner, but we get to eat more. There you go.
For a while, I noticed that there were Americans all around me that, instead of ploughing through this mountain of calories in one sitting, answered yes to what was then an unfamiliar question to me.
Oh, yeah. I knew this was coming. I didn't know this was an American thing. This is not a British thing? I guess not, because you're probably going to eat all your food. Wow, it's all making sense. I've never thought of the concept. Finishing all your food at the restaurant. Because in America, that can be difficult. So at the end of the meal, they offer a box. The box always looks different, but they've always got a box for you to put your leftovers in, your excess food, take it home.
That's right, it's completely normal in the United States of America to have your food boxed at the end of the meal with the intention of you taking it home and refrigerating it. Or just eat it later that night if you're feeling lucky.
Is that
and of course, now that
is that abnormal? Is that weird? I didn't know that was weird. I'm feeling very self-conscious as an American now. I feel like we're very strange.
That makes sense, right? I mean, you've paid your money for that food. You want to get your money's worth. But on top of that, it cuts down on waste. But at first, just because of what I was used to back home, it seemed weird to be taking leftovers home from a restaurant. In
Really?
Britain, as evidenced by the
Really? Brits too embarrassed to ask for a doggy bag, for a bag or a box to take home the food. That is so normal in America. The waiter will often offer the box. You don't even have to ask most of the time. Wow, that's a big difference. What?
this BBC article from a few years back, we've historically felt embarrassed even to ask for a box or a doggy bag because we are, I don't know, I haven't a clue why, actually. Either way, I think leftovers are great to the...
There's a difference for you between British and American culture. Brits are like, oh, I don't want to bug them. I feel a little weird asking for a bag or box. And Americans, even if it was weird in America, Americans would be like, I need a box. You have a box? I gotta take this food home. I wouldn't care at all.
extent that I have Indian food for breakfast. Don't judge me. Buffets.
Clean plate. Clean plate. I'm not sure what that means. That's a difference? Okay, between British and American restaurants. Clean plate.
Aside from the fact that America seems to be just a tad more into them than Britain, there's an aspect of the buffet-going experience that differs greatly between the two countries.
Oh.
Where I was from, depending on the buffet in question, I almost got the impression that it was rude to the kitchen staff to ask for a new plate when you're going up for seconds. In other words, whenever I went for, say, a Chinese buffet, I would go up, get my plate, scoop on all the food, go back to my table, realise that I am unrelentingly gluttonous, and then go back up for seconds using the same plate. It made me feel good that while devouring lots of solids, I'd done a solid to the kitchen staff.
Okay, I guess he's talking about British buffets, because in America, no one cares. Like or I should maybe the kitchen staff is annoyed, but Americans, you just go up to the buffet and you pick up a new plate off the stack and you just go to town, and you end up using like 3 or 4 plates if you're me.
That could be taken so many ways. Whereas once I moved to the United States, I realized that this was considered either weird or unhygienic.
Yeah.
At American buffets, customers are expected to get a new, cleaner plate when they go up for seconds, because this is a measure seen at preventing cross-contamination.
Yeah, okay. Man, this is an obscure one. This is a difference between Britain and America. Never would have thought about this. This is great. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence here. I think it might be excessive for us to go get a new plate every time. You know, if you're at home, you're not afraid to use your plate like multiple times or whatever. Yeah, maybe it is a little bit wasteful, honestly. I don't think the whole cross-contamination thing, like, you're not taking your dirty plate and putting it into the buffet. You're not, like, dipping it in the food. You're bringing the food to the plates. So I don't know. I kind of like the British way, honestly.
But I have to say, after practicing both methods, neither has caused me any personal problems. But while we're on the subject of Chinese food, that brings us on to this.
Oh,
I think it's fair to say
ethnic food. Oh, are we going to talk about like what types of ethnic food there are in Britain and America? I think America, I mean, we try to do ethnic food, like, but I think it's kind of fake or a cheap imitation. Americans love Mexican food, some Italian food, although that's pretty much all fake. Chinese food, yeah.
that in both Britain and America, ethnic food, or food that is usually associated with a country that is not this one, is extremely popular.
Yeah.
And to varying degrees, no matter if you're talking about the United States or Britain, the same countries are often represented at the dinner table. Off the top of my head, the big one is Chinese food.
Yes,
Except you guessed it, British Chinese food and American Chinese food is vastly different.
Really? I was actually super curious once he said Chinese food is popular in Britain. First thing I thought was, is it the same Chinese food that we do? Are we both doing like a fake Chinese food? I'm sure, even though there usually are Chinese people working at these Chinese restaurants, they make like what Americans expect sort of Chinese food. I'm pretty sure.
In Britain, Chinese food is often spicy, sometimes curry based. In the US, on the other hand, Chinese food tends to be centered around standalone fried meats, usually of the chicken variety. Now, these are not
Yeah, like savory kind of stuff. You would never expect Chinese food to be spicy. I've never heard that. I don't associate those together. Not that it's wrong. I don't even know what the heck the stuff is we eat here, but it's good. Spicy Chinese food in Britain. I had never heard that.
not entirely absent from Britain, but one way that America differentiates itself is that its Chinese food tends to be a lot sweeter than in Britain. But whichever way you
Okay.
slice it, I planned that. Both British and American Chinese cuisine is a modified version of what actual Chinese people eat in China.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It's like because Chinese food in China is like very organic and natural, like and very healthy. Sometimes a little bit strange, honestly. It wouldn't even appeal to our American palates. But yeah, this is interesting. I never thought about Chinese food in Britain, let alone that it's different.
And this seems to be a common theme that actually unites Britain and America. Take, for example, Indian food. While it should be pointed out that Indian food is more widely eaten in Britain than in
Yeah.
the United States, and that in my experience, certain Indian curries tend to be spicier than their American counterparts, neither
I gotta say, at least the parts of the United States I've lived in, Indian food is just not a thing. It's not really available. It's not really popular. It's not that Americans don't like it. It is spicy, which kind of a lot of Americans aren't familiar with, or kind of gravitating towards. But they're just not available. There's no Indian food place to go to, I guess.
is anywhere near as spicy as authentic Indian. On the other hand, in terms of everything I just said there, almost the exact opposite is true of Mexican food. America, by virtue of its neighborly status with Mexico,
Yes.
eats way more Mexican food than Britain does.
Okay. So Britain eats all the Indian food. America definitely eats the Mexican food. Americans love Mexican food. There are tons of Mexican restaurants. Again, sort of an Americanized version of authentic Mexican food. But there are oftentimes, Mexican people working there, like making the food. And it's extremely good. And Americans are definitely a bit obsessed with it. Yeah, for sure.
Even if, by all accounts, tacos and the like have started to make waves in Britain, but even America's version of Mexican food is often a departure from what's eaten south of the border, with authentic Mexican food often less spicy than Americans are used to. And it was in the restaurants of America that I got a first-hand feel for how America likes to modify the national dishes of other countries.
Oh God, yes, that's a good point. The sort of spicy food realm Americans live in is Mexican food. That's spicy. Yeah, okay, that's accurate. Okay.
To create what amounts to their own version, because they even do this with English cuisine, and that brings us on to this.
Oh boy.
If you were to ask me,
National dishes. What even is the national dish of the United States? Like barbecue or something? Or what kind of English dishes do we try to like imitate and probably fail?
to name 3 dishes from both countries, off the top of my head, I would say this. For Britain, fish and chips, Sunday roast, and a full English breakfast.
Yes. Those are like some of the most British things I've ever heard that don't exist here. What would the American foods be? Barbecue? Like a hamburger? Or pizza? Or, yeah, fried chicken or something? Yeah, that's pretty good.
For America, hamburgers, hot dogs, and pizza. And yes, I realise that all of those
Yes.
have disputed or undisputed origins in Germany and Italy, but over time they have become synonymous with the United States.
Right.
But to a lesser degree, and because of American influence, hamburgers, hot dogs, and pizza can all be found in restaurants in the UK. And I'm sure to some
Oh.
degree there'll be places in Britain that sell Chicago-style pizza, even though it's nothing like it.
That's an American influence on Britain. Whether you like it or not, Britain sells or makes available hamburgers and hot dogs, pizza for like the American tourists. Because as annoying as we are, we got money that we're willing to spend. And that's the universal language. So the hamburgers are available. Okay, great.
Or even in my birthplace of Cleethorpes, Chicago-style burgers, whatever that is. But in reverse,
What?
whenever America tries to replicate popular British dishes, it's sort of like being in an alternate universe. It's
I don't think America attempts to like do authentic British dishes. Like not really, not often, or I can't even say that I've ever run into that. To be perfectly honest, I don't think America really tries to do that.
great, but it's different. Very rarely do you get fish and chips where the chips slash fries are thick cut and greasy, and the fish is singular and large. Instead, you usually get 3 or 4 smaller pieces of fish that are usually a tad saltier than what you'd expect.
I mean, this is true. There's a difference. I guess there's a difference between the fish and chips, but you are going to be hard pressed to find somewhere that will sell you fish and chips in America, really.
Back home. Oh, and did I mention there's no mushy peas?
No.
Honestly, it's like being in
No.
the south of England.
No.
And in terms of the other two, the Sunday roast and the full English breakfast, well, I found those a lot harder to come by in the US than fish and chips.
Yeah.
Even at those pubs that, every state has that purport
we have imitation of pubs that aren't like authentic. Apparently they try to imitate full English breakfast and Sunday roast, and yeah, Americans, we have our own crazy breakfast, which is just random. The American breakfast, like pancakes, some bacon, maybe some eggs, some microwave sausage. That's about right.
to be authentically British. And lastly,
Oh, terminology. Oh, this will be interesting. Some terms with British restaurants and American restaurants that are different. We call stuff in the restaurant different things.
we can't talk about British versus American restaurant differences without talking about the terminology. You see, it's
Okay.
one thing to get your food boxed at the end of a sit-down meal, but many of us might like to take it home without sitting down in the restaurant in the first place. In Britain, I always knew this as getting takeaway.
I actually just learned about this word. I just learned about this in another video I did very recently. Coincidentally, takeaway, where you go and get food from a restaurant and take it home, is our version of takeout. Right.
Which is why I was profoundly confused when I worked in an American office environment and they talked about the key takeaways from the meeting. I thought I was getting curry and chips. In America, this is referred to as takeout or sometimes carry out.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
regardless of portion size, we
True.
can't even agree on what to call each meal. In the US, for the most part, the meal immediately preceding the main meal is usually known as an appetizer.
Yeah.
In Britain, I always
Starter? Starter.
refer to this as a starter.
Starter. I mean, very rare. I think most Americans actually know this word, starter. Some people might say starter. Yeah, it's just like rare. I don't even know why that's a word, but it is. But we almost always say appetizer. But I know what a starter is. Americans would know what this word is. It's just like something we rarely use. How strange.
But some, as the French do, might call it an entree.
Oh.
And this is where things get confusing, because Americans and Canadians alike use the word entree to mean the main meal. For us,
Yes.
the main meal is usually known as the main course.
Okay. Most Americans would say entree, but I would understand what main course. Some Americans might even say main course. Kind of like most Americans say appetizer, some might say starter. So these are like different, but there's a little overlap here between Britain and America with the terms, actually.
If it's a Sunday roast, that main course will include a Yorkshire pudding, and this is where things get doubly confusing.
Oh, God.
Because we in Britain also use the word pudding as a catch-all term for dessert.
Oh, really? I have never heard that. Pudding, because pudding like means something different in Britain altogether, because pudding in Britain can be like solid, and here it's just mush. But now pudding can just be a general term for dessert. That's just British. I've never heard that. Wow.
In fairness, we do also interchangeably use the word dessert. In America, the word pudding is more specific, and
Yeah.
the catch-all term has been deserted in favour of dessert. And the implements with which we eat this food, i.e. the knife, fork and spoon, is known collectively in the United States as silverware.
What what could it be called in Britain? It's not silverware? Is it cutlery? I'm just thinking of like what are other words we use, but almost never for things. We always say silverware. Maybe it's cutlery?
Whereas this word, when used in Britain, would pertain more to ornate metal plates, or perhaps metallic jugs, or sports trophies. A lot of the time, instead, we'll collectively refer to knives, forks, and spoons
Yeah, okay. So
as cutlery.
whatever I think is like the fancy way of saying it in America, whatever the fancy way of saying something is, that's probably the British way. Because most people say silverware, cutlery is fancy. Starter is fancier than appetizer. Now I get it. That's funny. Because I don't know if Brits see that the same way or the opposite way, but that's definitely how we see it in America. It's funny.
And as we all know, it's very rude to leave a restaurant without paying. And this is why we ask for the bill, or at least we do in
bill.
Britain. Because most of the time here in
Okay, bill. In America, we might say check. Most people say check. But again, some people might say bill. There's a lot of overlap here.
the US, Americans will ask for the check.
Yes.
And that's it for this episode.
Yes.
Let me know in the
Huh.
comments below if you've been to restaurants in
Huh, that was great. That was really enjoyable. I never expected so many differences between British and American restaurants. I had no idea. That was way more fascinating than I ever expected. That was by Lost in the Pond, and I gotta give that a like. That was very enjoyable. 7 ways British and American restaurants are different. Holy cow. Those were like legitimate too. Stuff I'd never thought about. Yeah, I feel a bit educated now. That's actually really interesting. I'm glad I took a look at this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on any of these things we learned. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Britain or British culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.